For privacy reasons, the names of individuals involved in this case have been changed. Stay tuned. He had a charming smile, an eloquent voice, and mesmerizing eyes. He appeared on television, attracting everyone's attention without anyone knowing that behind that glamorous appearance was a devil in human form. For many years, he hunted unfortunate victims, turning them into prey in his sick game. He took their pictures, made them trust him, then cruelly took their lives in a brutal way. It took the police decades to track him down, but when all the mysteries were revealed, the real number of victims really made the whole country shudder. Who was he? What made him become a ruthless killer? And how many victims have not been found? The horrifying story of Richard Coleman, the murderer on the dating stage, where every unsolved mystery contains secrets that want to be revealed. Step into the darkness and explore them with us. Don't hesitate to leave a like as an encouragement for us. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to update the most classic cases. Richard Coleman, also known as the dating game killer, was one of the most brutal and cunning serial killers in American history. Unlike many other killers, he was not taciturn, suspicious, or easily detected. Instead, he possessed a magnetic presence, a captivating confidence, and a terrifying ability to manipulate people. It was this combination of looks, intelligence, and predatory instincts that allowed him to approach his prey with ease, turning his unfortunate victims into toys in his sick game. Coleman didn't just kill. He turned crime into an obsessive art. He approached women by pretending to be a talented photographer, convincing them to pose for him in front of the camera. Some escaped his clutches, but many victims were not so lucky. Once he caught his prey off guard, he revealed his true nature: brutal, heartless, and bloodthirsty. He tortured them, killed them in gruesome ways, and sometimes kept photos of his victims as trophies of his crimes. The scariest thing is that Richard Coleman was not just a murderer hiding in the shadows. He appeared openly on television, right in front of millions of Americans. In 1978, he participated in a famous dating show called The Dating Game and even won, winning a date with the show's female lead. No one in the audience or production crew could have guessed that the charming, humorous man on television was a real-life monster. For years, he hunted victims, causing terror in America. It took the police decades to track him down, and when all the mysteries were revealed, the truth about the number of victims shocked the whole country. But is what people know the whole truth? Or are there still dark secrets left undiscovered? Richard Coleman was born on August 23, 1943, in San Antonio, Texas, to a working-class family. He grew up in a volatile and unstable environment. When Coleman was 8 years old, his father suddenly abandoned the family, leaving his mother in poverty. Left with no other choice, she took her children and moved to Los Angeles, California, in hopes of finding a new life. But instead of bringing a chance to change her life, this was the beginning of a path of crime that lasted for decades. From a young age, Coleman showed outstanding intelligence but also showed signs of psychological abnormalities. He possessed the ability to communicate skillfully, easily winning over others. But at the same time, he had a tendency to manipulate and deceive and felt no remorse for hurting others. He had a talent for art, especially photography, and often carried a camera with him to take pictures of anything that interested him. But behind the appearance of a talented teenager was a twisted, dark mind. In 1961, at the age of 18, Coleman joined the United States Army in search of a new direction in life. However, his time in the Army did not last long. During training, he began to exhibit strange, uncontrollable, and violent behavior. After a number of times showing unusual aggression and disobedience, military doctors conducted psychological tests and diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder. Unable to continue serving, Coleman was dishonorably discharged. After leaving the Army, he decided to return to his studies. With his natural artistic talent, he enrolled in university, majoring in art and photography. In the eyes of his friends and teachers, Coleman was an intelligent, charismatic, and promising student. However, no one knew that his danger lay not in what he showed on the outside, but in what he hid on the inside. It was during this time that the darkness within him began to manifest more strongly than ever. He was not only passionate about photography, but also had a hobby of taking pictures of women in obsessive ways. He began to seduce and manipulate young girls, with the promise of turning them into models, convincing them to take increasingly bold pictures. But to him, photography was not just an art, it was a tool to hunt. No one could have guessed that. Just a few years later, this talented art student would become one of the most feared murderers in American history. His first crime was discovered in 1968, when a passerby in Los Angeles happened to witness a terrifying scene. He was luring an 8-year-old girl named Lena Carter into his car. The passerby, sensing something was wrong, decided to intervene and called the police. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they found the girl lying unconscious on the floor of the car, her body brutally beaten and showing signs of abuse. However, he managed to escape before he was arrested, leaving his victim haunted and the community in confusion. After fleeing Los Angeles, he moved to New York, where he hoped to start a new life. Here, he changed his name and image, trying to erase the traces of his sinful past. He attended the NYU School of the Arts, where he was mentored by famous photographer Roman Polanski. With his artistic talent and skillful communication skills, he quickly integrated into his new academic and social environment. However, beneath the appearance of an art student, he still had dark intentions. He continued to hunt for victims, pretending to be a photographer to approach young women. He often invited girls to participate in photo shoots, creating a friendly and attractive atmosphere. Many girls, attracted by his charm and talent, agreed to participate in the photo shoots without knowing the criminal plots hidden behind. He used his artistic skills to create beautiful photos, but at the same time took advantage of the trust of his victims to commit crimes. He was not only a predator, but also a con artist, always looking for ways to satisfy his sick desires. His actions left indelible scars in the minds of his victims, and he continued to lurk in the shadows, leaving the police and the community living in fear of the presence of a dangerous killer. By the 1970s, Richard Coleman was no longer a mere fugitive. He had transformed into a serial killer with more sinister and sophisticated plots. Taking advantage of his photographic talent and deadly charm, Coleman wandered across the United States, from New York to California, then to Washington and Texas, always changing his identity and style to avoid detection. He approached hundreds of young women, promising them the opportunity to become models. But in fact, it was just a trap that led them to a horrible death. When entering his dark room, the poor girls had no idea that they had just entered a living hell, where Coleman tortured, abused, and brutally murdered them. According to estimates by police and investigators, the number of victims could be up to more than 130 people. However, only a few cases with clear evidence were officially confirmed. Natalie Parker, a 23-year-old flight attendant, dreamed of traveling the world. She met Coleman in a coffee shop in Manhattan, New York, where he approached her with an invitation to do a professional fashion photo shoot. With his attractive appearance and charming way of talking, he easily won her trust. The next day, Natalie went to his apartment in Brooklyn to do the photo shoot. But just a few hours later, she was murdered. Her body was found in an alley, strangled with stockings, with the killer's fingerprints still on her neck. Elaine Foster was the daughter of a wealthy Hollywood businessman. She grew up in luxury, but always wanted to pursue a career in modeling and acting. One day, while walking down Sunset Boulevard, she was approached by Coleman. He claimed to be a photographer who had worked for many major magazines and offered to do a test photo shoot for her. Elaine agreed to meet him one evening at a luxury hotel where he had rented a room. Little did she know that it would be her last. Her body was found 2 days later in an abandoned room, bruised and strangled. Julia Benson was an 18-year-old high school graduate preparing to go to college. She had a passion for art and wanted to have a beautiful photo shoot to remember her by. When Coleman offered to take her photos for free in Los Angeles, she didn't hesitate. But the photo shoot never happened. Julia was missing for 2 weeks before her body was found in a suburban wooded area with signs of brutal torture. Police said her wrists had been tied and her body had been stabbed multiple times. But most horrifyingly, her face was still covered in makeup, a haunting sign of how Coleman treated his victims. Charlotte Adams, 32, was a dedicated nurse, working at a hospital in Seattle, Washington. One day, Coleman showed up at the coffee shop she frequented after her shift. He struck up a conversation and quickly won her over with his humor and intelligence. A few days later, she invited him to her apartment for dinner. But that was a fatal mistake. Charlotte's body was found the next morning, in her bed, raped and strangled with a silk scarf. Police determined that the killer was calm and planned, as there were no signs of forced entry. That meant Charlotte had opened the door for the killer to enter. Rebecca Collins was a 12-year-old ballet dancer in San Diego, California. One afternoon, while on her way to dance class, Coleman abducted her in broad daylight. A witness recalled seeing a man drag Rebecca into a car, but was too late to intervene. A few days later, the police found the girl's body in a remote wooded area. She had been strangled to death, with her dancing shoes still on her feet. Rebecca's death shocked the public, causing the police to devote all their efforts to finding the killer. This time, Coleman could not escape. A witness managed to record his license plate number, helping the police track down his true identity. After a chase that lasted more than a week, Coleman was arrested in New Hampshire while he was trying to escape to Canada. Coleman was one of the most cunning and dangerous serial killers in history. He not only killed people, but also turned his victims into twisted works of his sick mind. With his handsome face and eloquence, he could easily make anyone let their guard down. Despite his arrest, the traces of the undiscovered victims remain a mystery. Police believe the figure of 130 victims may not be an exaggeration. And there are still many unsolved mysteries about this notorious killer. In 1978, in the midst of his horrific crimes, Richard Coleman had a strange moment in the history of serial killers. He appeared on national television, participating in a famous dating show, The Dating Game. This is a popular reality TV show in the U.S., where a single girl will choose one of 3 mysterious men based on their answers to questions about love and life. When he took the stage, Coleman appeared with a confident smile, neatly combed hair, and a polite demeanor. With a deep voice, he easily attracted the attention of the audience and the host. He answered questions with wit, sharpness, and even bold, flirtatious words, making the girl participating in the show laugh. The audience in the studio had no idea that the charming man in front of them was a serial killer who had murdered many women across the United States. After a while of chatting, the girl chose Coleman as her date, making him win the show. When he was announced as the winner, Coleman was excited, smiling brightly and waving to the audience. However, the story did not end there. After the show ended, when she went backstage to meet and schedule the date, the girl suddenly felt a strange unease. She said that Coleman had an uncomfortable look that made her shiver, and her intuition told her that there was something wrong with this man. In the end, she decided to decline the date, telling the organizer that Coleman made her feel uncomfortable. This angered him, but he still kept a fake smile on his face before leaving the set. No one on set or in the audience watching the show that day could have guessed that the charming man was actually a brutal killer, a man who had murdered countless women across America. It was only a year later, in 1979, that Coleman was arrested, and the horrifying truth about him was gradually revealed. His image on television became one of the most chilling moments in the history of American television. A killer standing right in front of millions of people, but no one recognized who he was. In 1979, police finally got the lead that led to Richard Coleman's arrest. while investigating the case of Rebecca Collins, a 12-year-old girl who had been abducted on her way to ballet class. Investigators found incontrovertible evidence linking Coleman to the crime. Using fingerprints, witness statements, and physical evidence collected at the scene, police surrounded and arrested him in Monterey Park, California. When he was arrested, he remained calm, even smiling while being handcuffed, as if he were not worried about the crimes he had committed. His trial took place in 1980, where Coleman was sentenced to death for the murder of Rebecca Collins. However, his legal journey was not easy. Over the course of 3 decades, his death sentence was overturned twice due to errors in the trial process. The defense attorneys repeatedly cited unfairness in the trial, errors in witness testimony, and unclear legal factors. But justice did not stop there. By 2010, with modern DNA testing technology, police were able to link him to 5 other murders in California, including those dating back to the 1970s. Now beyond reproach, Coleman was sentenced to death for the 3rd time. In his final trial, he defended himself, appearing arrogant and brazen, even laughing at the evidence against him. But what was even more terrifying was what police found after searching his possessions. Hundreds of photographs of women and children, many of whom were missing or unidentified. The photos had been collected during his years as a predatory photographer. Investigators believe the true number of victims could be as high as 130, but not all have been verified. Richard Coleman was eventually imprisoned at San Quentin State Prison, awaiting execution. He never expressed remorse or confessed, and until the end of his life, he kept the true number of his victims a secret. The case became one of America's most horrific serial killers, and to this day, many believe the list of unidentified victims continues to grow. After more than 4 decades in prison, Richard Coleman died on July 24, 2021, in San Quentin Prison Hospital, California. He passed away at the age of 77, taking with him countless secrets about his victims that have never been found. During the last years of his life, Coleman lived in isolation in the death row, where he had little contact with other inmates. Prison guards described him as cold, mysterious, and unrepentant. He was quiet, shunned interviews, but sometimes acted strangely, such as writing cryptic letters to his lawyers or drawing creepy pictures of unknown meaning. In 2019, Coleman's health began to decline. He was frequently hospitalized in the prison hospital due to heart and respiratory problems, along with signs of chronic kidney failure. There was widespread speculation that he may have suffered from a serious illness, but detailed medical records were never released. On the morning of July 24, 2021, prison staff found him unconscious in his cell and rushed him to the prison hospital. However, he did not survive and was pronounced dead at 5:42 a.m. The official report confirmed that he died of natural causes, but specific details were not released. His passing closed a horrifying chapter in American crime history, but it did not bring closure to the families of his victims. He never admitted guilt, nor did he reveal the true number of people he murdered. When police searched his personal belongings after his death, they found a notebook with mysterious symbols, lists of unidentified names, and gruesome drawings that raised suspicions that the number of victims may have been much higher than previously known. Coleman is dead, but his terrible secrets still lie somewhere in the dark, unsolved. Richard Coleman was not just a serial killer, but a dangerous predator who used his charm, intelligence, and psychological manipulation skills to commit horrific crimes over decades. He was not a madman who killed on impulse. He calculated his every move, carefully selected his victims, and used the perfect cover to hide his brutal nature. The fact that he was able to appear on national television, interact with celebrities, lure women under the guise of a photographer, and then continue to murder victims without being detected for years is a testament to his sophistication and coldness. The photographs found in his archives, containing hundreds of women and children whose identities have yet to be identified, are painful evidence that there may have been many more victims who were never recorded. Even in death, his haunting legacy remains. His crimes not only took the lives of dozens of innocent people, but also exposed the flaws in the legal and judicial system when a dangerous man can remain on the run for years, moving from state to state without being tracked down in time. How many more like him are still out there? How many monsters are still disguised as humans, blending into society, living among us without anyone knowing? Cases like Richard Coleman's are a valuable lesson in vigilance in life. They remind us that not everyone is who they appear to be, that a friendly face does not guarantee a kind heart, and that evil can lurk even in the safest places. Will the mysteries he left behind ever be fully solved? And more importantly, how many like him are still at large, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the next opportunity? Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this story and want to dive deeper into more intriguing mysteries, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.